You know how people always joke about getting locked in creepy places overnight? Yeah, well, it actually happened to me. And let me tell you, it's not funny when you're the one stuck in the middle of it. It started as a dare. My friends and I had been hanging out at this diner we always go to after work, and somehow the conversation turned to ghost stories. Someone brought up the old cemetery on the edge of town, the one that's been there since the 1800s and is supposedly haunted. You know the type. Crumbling headstones, twisted trees, and just enough urban legends to make it a local hotspot for thrill seekers. I heard they lock the gates at 10 p.m., my friend Nate said. But if you're already inside, you're stuck until morning. That's not true, I argued. They probably just close them to keep out vandals. No one's actually locking people in. Wanna bet? Nate smirked. I dare you to go there tonight. Stay until midnight. Now, I'm not one to back down from a dare, especially when Nate's the one dishing it out. He's got this way of acting like he's braver than everyone else, and I wasn't about to let him one-up me. So, like an idiot, I said, fine. I'll do it. A couple of hours later, I found myself standing at the cemetery gates with nothing but a flashlight and my phone. My friends had dropped me off, laughing and shouting words of encouragement as they drove away. Good luck. Nate yelled. Don't let the ghosts get you. The gates were wide open when I walked in, and the place was exactly as creepy as you'd expect. The headstones were old and weathered, some of them so cracked you could barely read the names. The trees loomed overhead, their bare branches casting long, spindly shadows in the moonlight. The air was cold, and the only sound was the crunch of leaves under my feet. I wandered around for a while, trying to act like I wasn't totally freaked out. I even took a few pictures on my phone, thinking I could show them to my friends later and prove how brave I was. But as the night went on, the silence started to get to me. Every little noise, a rustle in the bushes, the hoot of an owl, made my heart race. Around 10:15, I decided I'd had enough. I'd stayed long enough to prove my point, and there was no way I was hanging around until midnight. I headed back toward the gates, only to find them closed and locked. I stared at the padlock in disbelief. No way, I muttered. I tried shaking the gate, but it didn't budge. My stomach sank as I realized Nate hadn't been joking. They really did lock people in after hours. I pulled out my phone to call him, but of course, I had no signal. Perfect. I considered climbing the fence, but it was tall and topped with those sharp, decorative spikes. One wrong move, and I'd end up impaled. So I decided to wait it out. Morning wasn't that far away, right? I found a spot near a big oak tree and sat down, wrapping my jacket tighter around me. The night was eerily quiet, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. Every so often, I'd hear something, a twig snapping, leaves rustling, but when I shone my flashlight around, there was nothing there. At one point, I heard what sounded like footsteps. Not the slow, shuffling kind you'd expect from an animal, but deliberate, human footsteps. My heart started pounding as I stood up and scanned the area with my flashlight. Hello, I called out, my voice shaky. Is someone there? No answer. I told myself it was just my imagination, but then I saw something that made my blood run cold. In the distance, near one of the older graves, there was a figure. It was hard to make out in the darkness, but it looked like a person standing perfectly still, staring in my direction. Hey, I shouted, more out of fear than anything else. The figure didn't move. I waved my flashlight, trying to get a better look, but by the time the beam reached the spot, they were gone. I'm not ashamed to admit I panicked. I grabbed my stuff and started walking fast toward the opposite end of the cemetery, hoping to find another way out. The whole time, I kept looking over my shoulder, convinced that whoever or whatever I'd seen was following me. Eventually, I came across a small maintenance shed near the edge of the property. The door was unlocked, and I ducked inside, figuring it was safer than wandering around in the open. The shed was cramped and smelled like mildew, but at least it gave me a place to hide. I turned off my flashlight and crouched in the corner, trying to stay as quiet as possible. That's when I heard it. Footsteps. Slow and deliberate, crunching on the gravel outside the shed. They stopped right in front of the door. I held my breath, my heart pounding so hard I thought whoever was out there would hear it. The doorknob rattled, and I nearly screamed. But then, just as quickly as they'd come, the footsteps retreated. I stayed in that shed for what felt like hours, too scared to move. Eventually, I must have dozed off, because the next thing I knew, sunlight was streaming through the cracks in the door. I cautiously stepped outside, half expecting to see someone waiting for me, but the cemetery was empty. When I made it back to the gates, they were open. No sign of the padlock, no explanation. Just open. I walked home in a daze, still trying to make sense of what had happened. When I told my friends, they laughed it off, saying I must have imagined the whole thing. But I know what I saw and what I heard. To this day, I have no idea who or what was in that cemetery with me. All I know is I'm never going back. And if anyone ever dares me to do something like that again, hard pass.